Hi, I'm Catherine Chen, and this is the story of how my passion for teaching led me to uncover a family legacy worth billions. Though my wealthy in-laws took their time learning its true value. Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't in bank accounts, they're hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone who knows where to look. I still remember the night everything changed. I was sitting in the formal dining room of the Richardson family mansion, surrounded by antique furniture worth more than my yearly salary, while my mother-in-law, Eleanor Richardson, dissected my career choices over roast duck. A teacher, Catherine? She delicately dabbed her lips with a monogrammed napkin. Surely with your Stanford degree, you could find something more ambitious, something worthy of the Richardson name. My husband, Thomas, squeezed my hand under the table. He warned me this dinner would be difficult. His parents had never approved of him marrying a public school teacher, especially one whose family they deemed ordinary. I love teaching, Mrs. Richardson, I replied, maintaining my composure. My students? Yes. She waved her hand dismissively. Your students, but darling, you're married to the heir of Richardson Global Investments. How does it look when our society friends learn our daughter-in-law spends her days in a public school? Thomas cleared his throat. Mother, we discussed this. Catherine's work is important. Important? Richard Richardson Sr. finally spoke up from the head of the table. Do you know what's important, son? The $3 billion you're set to inherit. A legacy built over generations, and you've married someone who plays with finger paint and alphabet locks. I felt my cheeks burn. I teach high school history, actually, advanced placement. Oh, even better, Eleanor's voice dripped with sarcasm. You can tell your students all about how you married into real history. The Richardsons have been shaping American finance since the 1920s. I thought about my own grandfather then, Professor Lai Chen, the renowned archaeologist who disappeared on his last expedition when I was 12. He taught me that true history wasn't in mansions or bank accounts, it was in the stories we preserve and pass down. Speaking of history, Eleanor continued, we're hosting the museum board's annual gala next month. Perhaps, Catherine, you should skip this one. Last year's conversation about your career was rather awkward. That's when Thomas surprised everyone by standing up. Enough, Mother. Catherine is my wife. Her work educating young minds is more valuable than. Then what? Richard Sr. thundered. Then our family's reputation? The Richardson name means something in this city. We can't have it associated with someone so common. I stood up too, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I should go. Catherine, wait, Thomas reached for my hand. Yes, perhaps you should, Eleanor said coldly, and take some time to reconsider your choices. We've been patient, hoping you'd grow into your role as a Richardson. But really, a teacher? In public school? I walked out of the dining room, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Behind me, I could hear Thomas arguing with his parents, their voices rising. I drove home to my grandfather's house, the one place I felt truly at peace. While Thomas and I owned a luxury condo downtown, bought with Richardson money, as Eleanor loved to remind me, I kept my grandfather's historic Victorian home as my private retreat. The house sat on the outskirts of the city, its weathered elegance a far cry from the Richardson mansion's opulent showcase. But within these walls lay something far more precious than the Richardsons could imagine. I made my way to my grandfather's study, unchanged since his disappearance 15 years ago. His last letter to me sat framed on the desk. My dearest Catherine, remember, the greatest treasures aren't always what they seem. Keep teaching, keep learning, and when the time is right, you'll understand my legacy. My phone buzzed, Thomas calling. I let it go to voicemail. He was probably still arguing with his parents, trying to defend my career choice while they plotted ways to mold me into their idea of a proper Richardson wife. I ran my fingers along the spines of my grandfather's books, ancient texts about lost civilizations, archaeological journals, and his personal diaries from decades of expeditions. The Richardsons might have their billions, but this was my inheritance, a love of history, of learning, of uncovering the stories that shaped our world. A knock at the door startled me. Thomas stood there, his tie loosened, looking exhausted. I'm so sorry, he said, stepping into the study. They had no right. They meant every word. I cut him off. They've never thought I was good enough. Then they're blind, he pulled me close. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I buried my face in his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. Your mother's right about one thing. I'm not Richardson material. I never will be. Good, he said firmly, because I fell in love with Catherine Chen, not some society clone. That's when it happened. As Thomas leaned against Grandpa's desk, his elbow hit a hidden lever. A soft click echoed through the room, and a panel in the bookshelf swung open. We stared at the revealed passageway, a cold draft wisping from the darkness. "Cat," Thomas whispered, "did you know about this?" I shook my head, my heart pounding. Grandpa's last expedition. He said he'd made a discovery that would change history, but he vanished before he could reveal it. Thomas pulled out his phone's flashlight. "Shall we?" I thought about Eleanor Richardson's sneering comments about my common background, about my grandfather's final letter, about all the stories he told me of treasures hidden in plain sight. "Yes," I said, taking Thomas's hand. "It's time to understand my legacy." What we found in that hidden room would shake the Richardson family's world to its core. But that was just the beginning. The beam from Thomas's phone illuminated a steep staircase descending into darkness. The air grew cooler as we made our way down, my hand trailing along the rough stone wall. "Your grandfather built this?" Thomas whispered, his voice filled with awe. "He must have," I replied, remembering summers spent watching Grandpa disappear into his study for hours. All those times he said he was working, he was down here. The staircase opened into a vast underground room that took my breath away. Climate-controlled glass cases lined the walls, each containing artifacts that belonged in the world's most prestigious museums. Ancient scrolls, delicate pottery, gleaming gold relics, a collection that spoke of civilizations lost to time. But it was the center of the room that made my knees weak. A massive vault door, modern and intimidating, stood like a sentinel guarding even greater secrets. "There's a keypad," Thomas pointed out. "Any ideas?" I approached the vault, my fingers hovering over the numbers. What would Grandpa have used? Then I remembered, he always said the most important dates were the ones that changed your life. I typed in my birth date, 09/15/1990. The vault door hissed, hydraulics engaging as it slowly swung open. "Oh my God," Thomas breathed. Inside, bathed in carefully controlled lighting, stood the lost treasures of the Ming Dynasty, artifacts that had disappeared centuries ago. Priceless porcelain vases, imperial jade seals, gold-threaded royal robes, and at the center, a dragon throne that history had thought lost forever. "This is impossible," I whispered, spotting my grandfather's journal on a nearby desk. "These pieces, they've been missing for hundreds of years." With trembling hands, I opened the journal to its final entry. "My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, you finally found what I've spent my life protecting. These aren't just artifacts. They're your heritage. Your grandmother's family were the secret keepers of the imperial treasures, protecting them from looters and colonizers for generations. I married into this legacy, just as Thomas has. The responsibility now passes to you. These treasures are worth billions, but their true value is in the history they preserve. Use this wisdom wisely. All my love, Grandpa." "Cat," Thomas said softly, "do you know what this means? This collection, it's worth more than the entire Richardson fortune many times over." I sank into Grandpa's old chair, my mind racing. "This isn't about money, Thomas. This is history, my history, culture that was almost lost forever." Just then, both our phones buzzed. Eleanor had sent a group text. "Thomas, Catherine, your absence from dinner was quite rude. We expect you both at tomorrow's board meeting. Catherine, it's time you learned what real responsibility looks like. 9 a.m. sharp." Thomas looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. Should we show them what real responsibility looks like? I thought about Eleanor's countless jabs about my common background, about Richard Sr.'s dismissal of my career teaching history, about the Richardson legacy they were so proud of. Not yet. I said, a plan forming in my mind. First, I need to make some calls. The next morning, I walked into the Richardson Global Investments boardroom exactly at 9 a.m. Eleanor and Richard Sr. sat at the head of the table, radiating disapproval. "Catherine," Eleanor began, "we've been discussing your role in the family, and—" "Actually," I interrupted politely, "I have something to discuss first." I opened my laptop and connected it to the room's display screen. The faces of the world's top museum directors appeared in a grid. The Louvre, the British Museum, the National Palace Museum of Taipei, and others. Ladies and gentlemen, I address the screen. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. Eleanor's perfectly maintained smile faltered. Catherine, what is this? Mother, Thomas stepped forward. You wanted Catherine to learn about legacy, about responsibility, while you're about to learn about hers. What happened next would change not just the Richardson family, but the entire art world forever. The boardroom fell silent as I pulled up the first images. On the massive screen behind me, thousands of years of Chinese imperial history glowed in pristine, high-resolution detail. As you can see, I addressed the museum directors. The collection includes over 300 pieces previously thought lost, including the Yongle Emperor's personal seal and the legendary Ming Dragon Throne. The director of the British Museum leaned forward in his video feed. This is extraordinary. The authentication papers? I held up my grandfather's journals and documentation. Full provenance along with my grandfather's detailed conservation records. The Chen family has been protecting these artifacts for generations. Eleanor's face had gone from confused to ashen. Chen family? I thought your grandfather was just a professor, Professor Lai Chen. The Louvre's director cut in. Was the most brilliant archaeologist of his generation. His disappearance was a terrible loss to the field. And you're saying he entrusted all of this to you? I nodded, watching Eleanor and Richard Sr. exchange panicked glances. Their concept of wealth, stocks, real estate, hedge funds suddenly seemed very modern and very small. The collection's estimated value, I continued, is approximately $12 billion. But its historical and cultural value is incalculable. Richard Sr. actually choked on his coffee. $12 billion, nearly 4 times the Richardson fortune. However, I raised my voice slightly. These artifacts don't belong in private hands. They belong to the world. The museum directors murmured in agreement. I'm proposing a global exhibition tour, followed by permanent installation in a new museum we'll build right here in the city. The Chen Richardson Institute for Historical Preservation. Thomas stepped forward. Richardson Global Investments will provide initial funding for the museum's construction, a way to give back to the community and preserve priceless history. Eleanor found her voice. You can't make these decisions without board approval. The Richardson name will benefit enormously, Thomas cut in smoothly. Imagine the headlines. Richardson family helps preserve ancient imperial treasures. Much better than wealthy family sneers at education, don't you think? The museum directors were already discussing logistics, their excitement palpable even through video screens. I could practically see Eleanor's social climbing mind racing to catch up, from disparaging my background to suddenly being connected to one of the greatest historical discoveries of the century. Catherine, she said weakly, I had no idea your family was so distinguished. That's the problem, isn't it? I replied quietly. You never bothered to ask. You were too busy judging me for being just a teacher. The next few months were a whirlwind. The announcement of the Chen Collection's discovery made international headlines. The Richardson family, led by Thomas, earned worldwide praise for their support of the museum project. Eleanor, ever the social chameleon, quickly became the collection's biggest champion. My brilliant daughter-in-law, she now told anyone who would listen, comes from a long line of cultural guardians. We're so proud to support her vision. The Chen Richardson Institute broke ground a year later. I insisted it include a state-of-the-art educational center where students from public schools would have free access to history's greatest treasures. My grandfather's study remains exactly as he left it, secret vault and all. Sometimes I sit there, reading his journals, understanding now why he pushed me to become a teacher, because preserving history isn't just about protecting artifacts. It's about passing knowledge to the next generation. Yesterday, I received a letter from one of my former students. She's studying archaeology in college now, inspired by her visits to our museum. You taught me that history isn't just in textbooks, she wrote. It's alive, waiting to be discovered. And sometimes the greatest discoveries are hidden in plain sight. As I sit in my office at the Institute, overlooking the museum grounds where school buses unload excited children, I can't help but smile. On my desk sits a photo of my grandfather, next to a jade piece from the collection, a small carving of a teacher with her students. Eleanor stopped by earlier, already planning the museum's first anniversary gala. Darling, she said, I've been thinking. Perhaps we should start a scholarship program for aspiring historians. After all, education is so important. I thanked her politely, remembering her sneers about my teaching career. People can change, I've learned, when their eyes are open to true value. Thomas and I still live in my grandfather's Victorian house. The Richardson mansion, with all its marble and gilt, never felt like home. Here, surrounded by books and history and the echoes of a legacy I'm still understanding, I feel my grandfather's presence. Last week, a reporter asked if I regretted just being a teacher all those years before discovering my inheritance. I showed her my classroom in the museum's education center, where I still teach weekly history classes to wide-eyed students. The acrid smell of smoke still clung to my clothes as I stood in front of what remained of my childhood home. Firefighters moved through the charred ruins, their flashlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. 28 years of memories reduced to ashes in a single night. Miss Parker? A firefighter approached, his face sympathetic beneath the suit. We've contained the fire, but I'm sorry, there's not much left to salvage. I nodded numbly, clutching my grandmother's old recipe book to my chest, the only thing I'd managed to grab before the flames forced me out. If I'd lost this, I would have never forgiven myself. It was the last thing Grandma Rose gave me before she passed away 6 months ago. Any idea what caused it? I asked, my voice hoarse from smoke. Looks like faulty wiring in the east wall, he replied. These old houses, sometimes the electrical systems just can't keep up with modern demands. I should have known. Should have updated the wiring when the lights started flickering last month. But between losing my job at the investment firm and caring for Grandma Rose in her final days, home repairs had fallen to the bottom of my priority list. Now I had nothing. No home, no job, no insurance. The policy had lapsed last week, and my renewal check was still sitting unmailed on my desk. Now nothing but ashes. Sarah, a familiar voice called out. My cousin Olivia was rushing across the lawn, her designer heels completely inappropriate for the debris-strewn yard. Behind her, my other cousin Marcus followed at a more measured pace. Oh my God, are you okay? We came as soon as we heard. Olivia wrapped me in a perfume-scented hug while Marcus stood back, surveying the damage with calculating eyes. They were my only living relatives since Grandma Rose died, but we'd never been close. They lived in the city, pursuing high-powered careers and socialite lifestyles, while I stayed in our small town, working and caring for Grandma. I'm fine, I assured Olivia, stepping back from her embrace. Just overwhelmed. You can't stay here, she declared, gesturing at the ruins. You'll come stay with me. My guest room is practically a hotel suite. Before I could respond, Marcus spoke up. What were you able to save? Just this. I held up Grandma's recipe book. Everything else. Grandma's recipes. Olivia's perfectly manicured hand reached for the book. I always meant to ask her for those. Remember her apple pie? No one could replicate it. I pulled the book closer to my chest, not ready to share this last piece of Grandma. It's more than recipes, it's her notes, her memories. She gave it to me the week before she died. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Did she? Interesting that she'd give you her prized possession when she was barely lucid at the end. I felt my spine stiffen. She knew exactly what she was doing. She made me promise to keep it safe. Of course she did, Olivia soothed, shooting Marcus a warning look. Come on, let's get you somewhere comfortable. You can go through the book later, maybe find something to bake that'll cheer you up. I let them lead me away from the smoldering ruins, too exhausted to argue. Olivia's cream-colored Mercedes felt surreal after the chaos and destruction of the night. As we drove through the sleeping town, I clutched the recipe book tighter, drawing comfort from its familiar worn leather cover. Grandma Rose had been more than just a grandmother to me. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, she raised me in that old house, filling it with the smell of baking and the sound of her gentle humming. While Olivia and Marcus visited occasionally for holidays, always bringing expensive gifts and stories of their glamorous lives, Grandma and I built something deeper. She taught me not just recipes, but life lessons, wisdom, and love. You know, Marcus's voice cut through my memories from the front seat. Now might be a good time to think about selling the property. Even with the house destroyed, the land itself is valuable. That whole area is being developed. Marcus, Olivia hissed. She just lost everything. This isn't the time. But I knew what Marcus was thinking. He'd been trying to convince Grandma to sell for years, arguing that the neighborhood was changing. that she could live comfortably in a modern apartment instead of that outdated money pit. Grandma had always refused, saying some things were worth more than money. "I'm not selling," I said firmly. "That land has been in our family for 3 generations." Marcus shrugged, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Just trying to help you see the practical side. You have no job, no insurance payout coming. How exactly are you planning to rebuild?" He had a point, even if I hated to admit it. My savings had been drained by Grandma's medical bills in her final months. The severance from my job would barely cover a few months' rent, let alone rebuilding a house. We pulled up to Olivia's luxury apartment building, all glass and steel and modern angles. The doorman nodded respectfully as we entered the lobby, though I caught him eyeing my smoke-stained clothes with concern. "Here we are," Olivia announced, throwing open the door to her apartment. "The guest room's through there. Why don't you get cleaned up? I'll make coffee." The guest room was bigger than my old bedroom, decorated in pristine whites and grays that made me acutely aware of the soup on my clothes. I set Grandma's recipe book carefully on the bedside table and headed for the shower, eager to wash away the physical evidence of the night's disaster. Under the hot water, I finally let the tears come. Everything I owned, every photograph, every memento of my parents and my childhood, gone. All I had left was this recipe book and, my eyes snapped open, the letter. In my shock over the fire, I'd completely forgotten about the letter Grandma had tucked into the recipe book, the one I was supposed to open 6 months after her death. Today marked exactly 6 months. I rushed through the rest of my shower and threw on the clothes Olivia had left out. Designer loungewear that probably cost more than my old wardrobe combined. With trembling hands, I picked up the recipe book and opened it. The letter was still there, nestled between pages of Grandma's flowing handwriting. The envelope was thick, sealed with wax in Grandma's old-fashioned way. On the front, in her elegant script, it read, "For Sarah, to be opened 6 months after my passing. Not a moment sooner, my dear." I broke the seal carefully, pulling out several folded papers. The first was a letter in Grandma's handwriting. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, 6 months have passed since I left this world. I'm sorry for making you wait, but there were things that needed to be settled first. Legal matters that had to be resolved before what I'm about to tell you could come to light. First, you should know that I haven't been entirely honest with you or anyone else about our family's financial situation. The simple life I lived, the modest means I claimed to have. It was all carefully constructed. The truth is hidden throughout this recipe book, in places only someone who truly knows me would think to look. But before you go searching, you need to understand why I kept this secret, why I chose you to inherit not just recipes, but a legacy that goes far beyond apple pies and chocolate chip cookies. Your cousins visited me the week before I gave you this book. They had a proposition, one that showed me their true colors more clearly than ever before. A knock at the door made me jump, shoving the letter back into the recipe book. "Sarah?" Olivia called. "Coffee's ready." "Coming," I replied, my heart pounding. What had Grandma hidden? What proposition had my cousins made? I tucked the recipe book under the guest room pillow before joining them in the living room. Olivia pressed a cup of expensive coffee into my hands while Marcus lounged on the designer sofa, typing rapidly on his phone. "I've been thinking," Olivia said, settling into an armchair. "Why don't you stay here for a while? Take some time to figure things out. I'm sure Marcus and I can help you find a job in the city." "That's very generous," I replied carefully, noting how Marcus's typing slowed as he listened for my response. "We're family," he said without looking up from his phone. "We take care of our own." But something in his tone made me uneasy. I remembered Grandma's words in the letter about their true colors, about a proposition they'd made. What were they really after? "I think I'll stay for a few days," I said, buying time to figure out what Grandma had hidden in that recipe book. "Just until I can make some arrangements." Olivia beamed while Marcus nodded, but I caught them exchanging a look when they thought I wasn't watching. They were up to something, I just didn't know what. As I sipped my coffee, my mind raced. What had Grandma hidden in that book? Why had she waited 6 months to reveal it? And most importantly, what did my cousins know that made them suddenly so interested in helping me? The recipe book sat hidden under the pillow in the guest room, holding secrets that could change everything. I just had to figure out how to uncover them before my cousins showed their true intentions. That night, after Olivia and Marcus had gone to bed, I slipped back into the guest room and retrieved Grandma's recipe book. My hands trembled as I pulled out the letter and continued reading. Your cousins came to me with an ultimatum. They had discovered some of my investments through their business connections, though they didn't know the full extent. They threatened to contest any will I wrote, to drag your inheritance through years of legal battles unless I agreed to their demands. They wanted control of everything, Sarah, not just the money, but the house. The land, everything our family has built over generations. They spoke of development deals and property values, but never once mentioned the memories we made there, the legacy it represents. That's when I knew I had made the right choice in choosing you as my heir. Look carefully at my recipe for apple pie, dear one. Remember how I always said the secret was in the measurements? I quickly flipped to the apple pie recipe, one I'd seen hundreds of times but never truly understood. Grandma's measurements had always seemed odd, precise numbers with decimal points for simple ingredients. Now, looking at them through new eyes, I gasped. They weren't measurements at all. They were stock numbers and share quantities. With shaking fingers, I began pulling apart the book's binding. Inside, pressed between layers of aged leather, were stock certificates, dozens of them. Blue-chip companies, tech giants, pharmaceutical corporations, some dating back decades. But more than that, there were deeds, property titles, and documents showing ownership of patents I'd never known existed. As I laid everything out on the bed, the full scope of Grandma's fortune became clear. She hadn't just been saving recipes, she'd been building an empire in secret. The total value of just the stocks alone was over $8.7 million. A soft knock at the door made me freeze. Sarah, Olivia's voice came through. Are you still awake? I quickly gathered everything, stuffing it back into the recipe book. Just a moment, I called, hiding the book under my pillow and trying to calm my racing heart. When I opened the door, both Olivia and Marcus stood there. The sympathetic smiles from earlier were gone. We need to talk, Marcus said, pushing past me into the room. About Grandma Rose's recipe book. What about it? I asked, painfully aware of the millions hidden just feet away. Don't play dumb, Olivia snapped. We know there's more than recipes in there. Grandma was worth a fortune, and that book is the key to finding it. I stepped back, bumping against the bed. How would you know that? Marcus's face hardened. Because we had her investigated in her final months. We knew she was hiding something. When we confronted her, she promised to make things right in her will. But she didn't, did she? Instead, she gave everything to you. You investigated our dying grandmother? The shock in my voice was real. While I was taking care of her, you were hiring private investigators? Oh, drop the moral high ground, Olivia scoffed. You were just playing the devoted granddaughter to get her money. Well, guess what? We won't let you get away with it. Hand over the book. I reached under the pillow, clutching the recipe book tight. No. Sarah, Marcus's voice turned threatening. Don't make this difficult. There are 3 of us and 1 of you. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. 3? I asked, confused. The guest room door opened wider, revealing Thomas, Marcus's personal lawyer, standing in the hallway with a briefcase. Miss Parker, Thomas said smoothly, I have documents here showing that your grandmother was not of sound mind when she gave you that book. Sign them, hand over the book, and we'll give you a generous settlement. I looked between their faces, Olivia's barely concealed greed, Marcus's cold determination, Thomas's professional detachment. Then I smiled. You're right about one thing, I said. Grandma did make things right in the end. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a recording. Grandma Rose's voice filled the room. I, Rose Eleanor Parker, being of sound mind, do hereby declare that any previous statements regarding my estate were made under duress. My grandchildren, Marcus and Olivia Parker, threatened legal action unless I complied with their demands. Their faces turned pale as the recording continued, detailing their threats, their investigation, their attempts at manipulation. That's inadmissible, Thomas sputtered. You can't? Oh, but I can. I cut him off. You see, Grandma didn't just leave me recipes, she left me evidence. Documents showing how you embezzled from your clients, Marcus. Records of your insider trading, Olivia. All safely stored with her lawyers to be revealed only if you contested her wishes. Marcus lunged for the recipe book, but I was ready. I stepped aside, letting him stumble past me. I've already photographed everything, I said calmly. The stocks, the deeds, the evidence against you both. One call to my lawyer, and it all goes public. You're bluffing, Olivia whispered, but her voice shook. I pulled out Grandma's letter, reading aloud. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then Marcus and Olivia have shown their true colors. The real inheritance isn't just the money. It's the chance to finally break free from their greed and manipulation. Thomas cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Get out, I said firmly. All of you. And if you ever try to contest this inheritance, if you ever come after me or what's mine, everything comes out. Every dark secret, every illegal deal. They left quickly after that, Olivia nearly running in her designer pajamas, Marcus dragging his shell-shocked lawyer behind him. As their car peeled away from the building, I sank onto the bed, finally letting out the breath I'd been holding. The next morning, I checked into a hotel and called Grandma's real lawyer, the one she'd mentioned in her letter, not the corrupt one working with Marcus. Everything she'd said was true. The fortune was mine, legally and irrevocably. I spent the next few weeks putting her plan into action. The house would be rebuilt not as the modern monstrosity Marcus had envisioned, but as a community center with a teaching kitchen where people could learn the real secrets of Grandma's recipes, love, patience, and the importance of family. The stocks and investments she'd hidden would more than cover it, with enough left over to start a foundation in her name, helping other grandmothers and granddaughters build their own legacies. 1 month after the fire, I stood on the cleared property, Grandma's recipe book in my hands. Workers were already laying the foundation for the new building. In the morning sun, I could almost see Grandma Rose standing there, smiling her knowing smile. I opened the book to the apple pie recipe, now understanding the true measurement of its worth. It wasn't just about the millions she'd hidden. It was about trust, foresight, and love. My cousins had spent years chasing wealth, but Grandma had taught me that real value isn't just about money. The secret, she always said, is in the measurements. She wasn't just talking about baking. She was teaching me how to measure what truly matters in life. Marcus and Olivia never contested the inheritance. The evidence Grandma had gathered was too damaging, their careers too fragile to risk exposure. Sometimes I see their names in business magazines or social pages, still playing their roles in high society. But they avoid me now, crossing the street if they see me coming. As for me, I still bake Grandma's apple pie every Sunday, using the real measurements now. The community center's kitchen fills with the same warm, sweet scent that once filled our old house. Young people come to learn baking, but they leave with something more valuable. Lessons about patience, honesty, and the true meaning of legacy. In the end, losing everything in that fire led me to discover what I'd had all along. A grandmother wise enough to see the truth, brave enough to plan for it, and loving enough to make sure justice was served, even after she was gone. The recipe book sits in a special display case in the community center now, its secrets revealed but its real treasure preserved. The love of a grandmother who knew that the greatest inheritance isn't measured in millions, but in the wisdom she passes down to those who truly deserve it. A food truck? My sister Amanda's laughter echoed through our parents' expansive dining room. Oh, this is rich. Little Sophie's going to sell tacos out of a truck. I stood my ground, clutching the business plan I'd spent months perfecting. Around the mahogany table, my family's reactions ranged from amusement to outright disgust. We sent you to Cornell School of Hotel Administration, my father said, his voice tight with disappointment, and this is what you want to do with that education. My brother Michael, fresh from his MBA, couldn't contain his smirk. Dad, don't worry. She'll come crawling back to the family restaurants once she realizes how ridiculous this is. The Martinez family restaurants, 5 upscale establishments in prime Manhattan locations, each more pretentious than the last. My father had built the empire from nothing, true, but somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten his roots. The simple, authentic Mexican food that had originally made his name had been replaced by $50 deconstructed tacos and avant-garde interpretations of traditional dishes. I want to bring back real food, I said firmly. Food that reminds people of home, of family. Food truck food reminds people of food poisoning, Amanda cut in. She gestured to her designer dress. Some of us have standards to maintain. My mother, ever the peacekeeper, tried to intervene. Sophie, darling, why not start as manager at one of the restaurants? Learn the business properly. I know the business, Mom. I've worked every position since I was 16. But I want to do something different, something authentic. Authentic? Michael scoffed. Our restaurants are featured in Michelin guides. You want to serve street food to drunk college students? I pulled out my phone, opening the photos I'd taken during my research trips across Mexico. Look at these lines of people waiting for street tacos in Mexico City. Look at the joy on their faces. That's what real food does. It brings happiness, not just Instagram posts. My father stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Enough. If you want to embarrass this family with your little food truck fantasy, don't expect any help from us. Not a penny. I don't need your money, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I've saved enough from working at the restaurants, and I have a plan. Oh, this should be good, Amanda sneered. Do tell us your brilliant strategy for changing the world one food truck taco at a time. I took a deep breath. I'm starting with one truck, yes. But I'm combining traditional recipes with modern technology. I've developed an app for mobile ordering, real-time location tracking, and a loyalty program. The food will be authentic, but the experience will be cutting edge. Michael burst out laughing. An app? For a taco truck? Next you'll tell us you're disrupting the burrito industry. Actually, I pulled up my beta testing results. Early trials show a 40% increase in customer retention with the app, and an average order value 25% higher than traditional food trucks. But they weren't listening anymore. They never did when it came to my ideas. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of my newly renovated food truck. La Cocina Rodante, the rolling kitchen. It had cost most of my savings, but it was beautiful. Gleaming steel, professional-grade equipment, and a bold, colorful design that caught the eye without being tacky. My first employee, Rosa, arrived early that morning. She was in her 50s and had worked as a line cook at one of my father's restaurants for 20 years before being let go when they modernized the menu. Está hermoso, she said, running her hand along the counter. Just like the food trucks back home. Think your family recipes will work here? I asked. She smiled, pulling out a worn notebook filled with handwritten recipes. Mind ya, these recipes fed 3 generations. They'll work anywhere. Our first day was chaos. The lunch rush hit hard, with curious office workers drawn by our social media campaign. Rosa's authentic tacos al pastor were a hit, but our ordering system crashed twice. I spent that night debugging the app, determined to get it right. By the end of the first week, we had regulars. By the end of the first month, we had lines. Your cilantro lime sauce is legendary, a customer told me one day. My whole office talks about it. That sauce was Rosa's secret recipe, passed down from her grandmother. We served it with everything, and people couldn't get enough. 6 months in, we had 3 trucks operating in different parts of the city. Each one had its own dedicated following. The app was working perfectly, letting customers track their favorite truck and order ahead. Then came the call that changed everything. Ms. Martinez? The voice was professional, crisp. This is James Wilson from Venture Capital Partners. We're very interested in your operation. I almost dropped my phone. VCP was known for turning small food businesses into national chains. Your integration of traditional Mexican street food with modern technology is exactly what we've been looking for, James continued. Would you be interested in meeting to discuss expansion opportunities? That meeting led to our first round of funding, $2 million to develop what would become Casa Auténtica, our first brick-and-mortar restaurant. The location I chose was deliberate, just 2 blocks from my father's flagship restaurant. You're making a mistake, Michael warned when he heard. Fast casual Mexican food? There's no market for that in this neighborhood. But he was wrong. On opening day, the line stretched around the block. People waited 2 hours for Rosa's tacos, now served in a bright, modern space that still maintained the warmth and authenticity of our food trucks. The reviews were overwhelming. Finally, real Mexican food in a convenient, modern setting. The app makes ordering so easy, and the food tastes like my abuela's cooking. Best tacos in the city, hands down. Within a year, we had 5 locations across New York. Each one carried Rosa's recipes, each one maintained our commitment to authenticity, and each one was powered by our now patented ordering technology. Then came the profiles in food magazines, the features on cooking shows, the requests for franchising rights. I kept every mocking text my siblings had sent, every dismissive email, every sneering comment about my little food truck experiment. They weren't sneering anymore. One morning, as I was reviewing plans for our 20th location, my assistant came in looking uncomfortable. "Ms. Martinez, your brother Michael is here to see you. He says it's important." I looked up at the empire I'd built from a single food truck. The wall of awards, the glowing reviews, the financials showing our growth exceeding all projections. "Send him in," I said. It was time to see who was embarrassed now. Michael looked different from the last time I'd seen him. His designer suit seemed less crisp, his confident swagger replaced by an uncertain shuffle. He stood in my office doorway, taking in the view of the Manhattan skyline behind my desk. "Nice office," he managed finally. "Better than Dad's." "What do you want, Michael?" He sank into one of my visitor chairs, running a hand through his hair. "The restaurants, they're not doing well." I pulled up the industry reports on my tablet. I already knew this, of course. I monitored every aspect of the food service industry, including my family's struggling empire. Dad's still refusing to adapt. I asked though I knew the answer. He says authentic Mexican food is beneath our brand. Meanwhile, we're losing customers too. He gestured vaguely around him. This Casa Authentica had grown to 50 locations across the country. Our revenue last quarter had exceeded $100 million. The Wall Street Journal had just profiled me as the woman revolutionizing fast casual dining. And I prompted. "I need a job," he blurted out. "The restaurants, we're going to have to close 3 of them." Dad's not listening to reason. Amanda's already jumped ship. She's working for some fusion place in Leh. I leaned back in my chair, remembering his words from 2 years ago. What happened to me crawling back to the family restaurants? He flinched. "Sophie, I was wrong. We were all wrong. What you've built here, it's incredible. It's just a food truck empire," I said mildly. "Nothing as prestigious as your Michelin-starred establishments." "Stop," he leaned forward. "I know I was horrible to you, but I'm here now, admitting I was wrong, asking for help." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street where one of our food trucks was parked. The lunch line already stretched around the corner. "You know what the secret is, Michael? Why we succeed while Dad's restaurants fail?" He shook his head. "Because we never forgot what food means to people. It's not about prestige or Instagram posts. It's about connection. Every recipe we serve has a story, a family behind it." I pressed a button on my desk. "Rosa, could you come in, please?" Rosa entered, now our executive chef and head of menu development. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Michael. "You remember my brother," I said. "The one who thought food trucks were beneath him." Rosa crossed her arms. "I remember when he told your father to fire me. Said my cooking was too rustic for the new menu." Michael had the grace to look ashamed. "I was wrong about that too. Rosa's cilantro lime sauce, I told him, the one you called peasant food. We sell it bottled now. It brought in $5 million last year alone." "I've learned my lesson," Michael said quietly. "I'll start anywhere. Prep, cook, dishwasher, whatever you need." I exchanged looks with Rosa. She gave a small nod. "Actually," I said, "we do have an opening. We're launching a training program for new franchisees, teaching them our recipes, our values, our way of doing things. We need someone who understands both the business side and the importance of staying true to authentic cuisine." Hope flickered in his eyes. "You trust me with that?" "No," I said flatly. "Not yet. You'll start as a trainee yourself. 3 months working in our trucks, learning every recipe, every process. If Rosa says you're ready after that, we'll talk about the training program." 3 months in a food truck? He looked at his expensive suit. "Take it or leave it." He stood up and extended his hand. "When do I start?" "Right now." I handed him a company uniform. "Rosa's truck is parked outside to show you how to properly dice onions." After you left to change, Rosa turned to me. "You're kinder than I would be." "It's not kindness," I said. "He needs to understand what makes us different, what makes us better." The next few months were a transformation. Michael learned every recipe, every technique. He worked harder than I'd ever seen him work. His designer clothes were replaced by chef's whites. His manicured hands became calloused from chopping and cooking. One evening, I stopped by Rosa's truck toward closing time. Michael was teaching a new employee his grandmother's proper technique for making tortillas by hand. The dough has to feel alive, he was saying. Cada tortilla tiene su historia. Every tortilla has its story. Rosa nudged me. He's ready. The training program was a success. Michael had a way of connecting with new franchisees, helping them understand that success wasn't just about profits. It was about preserving the soul of our food while embracing modern innovation. 6 months later, I called another family meeting. This time, in my office. My father arrived first, looking older than I remembered. The closure of his remaining restaurants had made headlines in the food world. Amanda came next, her LA job having ended badly. She couldn't quite meet my eyes. "I suppose you're enjoying this," my father said, staring at the wall of awards. "Watching everything I built crumble while you succeed." "Actually," I said, "that's why I called you here." I laid out my proposal. We would buy his remaining restaurants, but not to close them. We would transform them into high-end versions of Casa Auténtica, keeping some of his innovations while returning to authentic roots. "You want to turn my life's work into glorified taco stands," he demanded. "No, Dad, I want to save your life's work by reminding people why they fell in love with your food in the first place." Michael stepped in, still wearing his chef's whites. "She's right, Dad. I've learned more about our culture's food working in her trucks than I ever did in our restaurants. The Martinez name still means something," I continued. "But it should mean quality and authenticity, not just high prices and fancy plating." My father was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he asked, "And what role do you see for me in this new venture?" "Executive Chef Emeritus," I said, "working with Rosa to develop new recipes that honor our heritage while appealing to modern tastes. No more deconstructed tacos." He actually smiled at that. "Your mother always said those were pretentious." "Speaking of Mom," Amanda interjected, "she's going to love what you've done with the place." She looked around hopefully. "Any chance you need a marketing director?" "You'll start in the trucks, Michael," and I said simultaneously. 1 year later, we celebrated the opening of Martinez Heritage, our new high-end concept restaurant. My father and Rosa worked side by side in the kitchen, creating dishes that combine traditional flavors with modern presentation. Amanda, having paid her dues in the trucks, headed our marketing department. Michael led our franchise development program. The first item on the menu? Street tacos, served exactly the way they are in our trucks. The night before the opening, I found my father standing in the kitchen, looking at an old photograph now hanging on the wall. It showed him at 25, cooking at his first street cart in Mexico City. "I forgot," he said softly. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot what made the food special." "We all lost our way a little," I replied, "but we found it again." "Through a food truck," he chuckled. "Who would have thought?" I looked around at our empire, now the largest Mexican restaurant chain in the country, with over 200 locations. Every single one started with the recipes and values we developed in that first truck. "Sometimes," I said, "the best way forward is to remember where you came from." The next morning, before the restaurant opened, I drove our original food truck, now restored and retired except for special occasions, to park in front of Martinez Heritage, a symbol of how far we come and a reminder of how we got here. Rosa's granddaughter, now one of our head chefs, took a photo of all of us standing in front of it. The whole family, plus Rosa and her family, all wearing our Casa Auténtica uniforms with pride. "From food truck to fortune," Amanda mused. "You should write a book." "Maybe," I smiled. "But first, let's make some tacos." Because in the end, it was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving that success doesn't always look the way people expect. Sometimes it comes from a humble food truck, authentic recipes, and the courage to believe in your vision even when everyone else is laughing. And sometimes the best revenge isn't in proving doubters wrong, but in showing them a better way, one taco at a time.